Hi, my name's Pastor Eric, and if you listen to the Faith Over Breakfast podcast or Journey Companion Ministries podcast or the Healing the City podcast, you probably recognize my voice. And you probably recognize it as the intro to many of these, telling you all about how you can support us. We just want to say thanks for supporting us. Hope that you'll continue. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome
to
Faith
Over
Breakfast. That was a new one, guys.
Wow,
that was terrible.
It was really, really bad.
But hey, we had a good conversation of which we open up not knowing what our conversation is about.
Yep. Here's how it goes. Thoughts coming out of the Democratic National Convention, how to explain the rainbow flag to your kids, and the book of Ecclesiastes, coming from an excellent question from Christian. They do indeed relate to each other. I would recommend not skipping parts because I think it's better together.
That's right. And we don't chapter it, so you can't even link forward.
Yeah,
so.
You won't even know where it's at. You'll just be skipping around.
Surprised.
But I enjoyed the conversation.
I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yep. If you're a meat and potatoes person, you'll want to hang in there till the end.
Yep.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Money thing needs to be dealt with.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. As you have already heard, you know what we're talking about. But we don't at this stage.
This is a unique moment where you know what we're talking about, but the real time us doesn't.
Yes.
That's a special moment for you, listener.
Yeah. So we do have a question from Christian who's had other questions, and it's not just the imaginary guy out there named Christian, no, a real person.
We're not talking about Pilgrim's Progress.
We're not. So we do have a question from him. Also, the Democratic National Convention happened. That's really interesting. And then I got a question from someone in our congregation that I thought this would be an interesting thing to talk about. So we'll put all three of those out there on the table, and then we can just chat around them, I guess. But
the great thing is I apparently don't know what we talked about. To explain that, we make the intro after the podcast. But now I don't know what one of the topics is. That's very exciting for me. And, it's not my favorite, but I've rolled with it for how many years now?
It's for a lot. You are always rolling with me. I appreciate it. All right, so let's read Christian's question. Okay. Hey, guys, Christian again. I'm reading Ecclesiastes, and it is a strange read. So would be curious your thoughts on how to read the book of Ecclesiastes. Example 11, 8 through 10. I read it in the NLT version. Says, enjoy life young or old, but remember, it's all in vain. Paraphrased, of course. The whole block is full of whiplash-inducing statements like that, it seems.
Well, Christian, your job, your life, your wonderful new marriage, it's pointless, man.
It's all in vain.
That's not what we'll say. Christian, good to hear from you, and it was exciting to be at your amazing wedding in Oregon this summer. And thanks for sending in a question. So we'll get to that. There's some interesting stuff. I told you, Eric, last week that
you've done some studying.
I've recently taken a class on Ecclesiastes, which my former seminary never did. So I'm really grateful for that. It will not, clear everything up, but I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So I had meant to do a little bit of boning up on Ecclesiastes, because I'll tell you, if I have a choice, which I do because I'm volitional, of reading Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, I tend to default to Proverbs as a devotional space. So when I read Ecclesiastes, that's just because I'm reading through the Bible.
Interesting. I might be more prone to read it, and I wonder if our age difference and generation difference factor into this.
I memorized the first chapter
Yeah.
when I was in my 20s, and I read it a lot in my 20s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I moved on and find Proverbs much more.
Yeah. I gave a speech at my daughter's 8th grade graduation out of Ecclesiastes, and I've never been invited to speak again at Desert Christian in any of their schools. I thought it was interesting. It was yeah. But I did talk about how everybody gets old and withers and dies, and then I apologized to all the grandparents in the room, but said, "Well, but you will," and
yeah,
I got some laughs.
Yeah,
But it was interesting. So, okay, that Democratic National Convention. I actually think there are some ties between that. What's our third question, Eric?
So
Would you clue me in now,
and
please?
this one I want to put out there because I think I have a decent answer for it when having thought it out. But somebody in my church came and said, hey, let's say a child came to me and asked me about the rainbow flag at her school and wanted to know why it was so important.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know what to say to her. I'm not me, pastor, to the person. What do you think? Like, how do I approach this topic about the rainbow flag and be honest, but age appropriate? And I think the kid was probably 7.
Okay.
6 or 7. So I thought, well, hey, that's a question that would be really cool to just kind of talk through about how you talk about the ever-changing culture and its sexual moray and all that kind of stuff and how you raise kids in that.
I actually think these three tie together very well.
Oh, well, good, because the Holy Spirit's good at doing that. So you are a master of the tying together, and I'm the master of synthesizing, so we should do this.
Oh, yeah. Let's tie the synthesizer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our new podcast, Tying Synthesization.
No,
that's
a terrible name. Okay, so let's see. Let's go in this order.
Okay.
Let's go Democratic National Convention.
Okay.
Then Rainbow Flag, then Ecclesiastes.
Okay. So I'll start.
Yeah.
I only saw tiny bits of Harris's chat, or at least a little part where she was talking.
I've listened to 2/3 of Harris's speech and saw clips of other things.
So I kind of like to just kick it off with saying, if you're interested in kind of being out of the political like crazy, but want to know what's happening, the podcast Pour Over is so good.
And their emails are helpful too.
Yeah, really.
The Pour Over.
Pour Over. Really, really good. And if you want to dive deeper into what's happening, at least in the Trump world, or what it was like to be in the Trump presidency, there is an amazing interview with Preston Sprinkle with, I think, the Assistant Deputy to Homeland Security.
Oh, interesting.
And she just wrote a book about like extremism and stuff like that. And fascinating interview. And just kind of gives you a really honest, non-political picture into
what the people are like.
What was going on in the Trump world in that first thing. So those are two things. After listening to that and having listened a little bit more to the Pour Over, I'm like, this is a real crazy time we're in now.
It is. I think, Eric, I'm glad you've stumbled upon this fact. It is crazy. It is. There have been some other weird presidential elections, but this one feels particularly the last few have been particularly acute. This is we're at a critical time.
Yeah, and
as far as I want to state, America's the democracy, our country. Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah,
and I feel like we finally moved to what I would call a democratic oligarchy, and that you can run for president,
right?
And you can run for office, but the people with the money are 9 times out of 10 going to beat you. Yeah. So if they have more money than you, they are going to win.
Yeah, it's very and to get you. Yeah, anybody can run. Kanye could run, right?
Right.
But you're going to have to get the big platform behind you, and that's going to take. So even to become Kamala or Trump you have to have the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, and you have have to have strategically positioned yourself in a lot of different places to get there.
Which, in a way, Trump didn't do, which
No.
is part of the allure of Trump, is that he bypassed that by becoming a TV persona and all that, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that things have gone, when I say things have gone crazy, is my non-political wife,
Yeah.
who never really has an emotional experience related to politics at all, says, I'm really worried about this election.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, you never talk about politics. You don't care about politics. You don't watch the news. You just do what's in front of you. And it's even infiltrated her. And if that's true, I mean, if it's ending up in front of her, then
Well, I joined a cohort of leaders who are trying to process through how to guide people through this time earlier in the year, because this feels like a critical time. So I've been having discussions there, but what's reinforced that fact for me has just been the discussions I'm having with people. So, had breakfast yesterday with someone very worried, right? The general consensus of, and I should say I'm in that cohort with 50 some pastors, and they are worried. It's not just they're trying to figure this out like a puzzle. They're nervous.
right.
They're nervous about what happened over the last couple elections and how much that tore their churches apart and their communities apart. They're nervous that we're in such a pressure cook kind of situation that violence could result.
Yes.
That's where the pastors and even very influential ones are as far as how they feel. So that in that group, there's a lot of good consolation going on, where there's a discussion about the kingdom of God that is an anchor for our souls, reminding leaders about this, right? That this the kingdom of God, though it cares and is concerned about what happens in this world, it isn't ultimately of this world. It's not following the strategies of this world. It doesn't. It's not accomplished by sword and gun. It is accomplished by, you could lead on, O King Eternal. You could play the hymn in the background right now, not by swords loud clashing. But we all need reminded of the difference of the King Jesus, and how he brings his kingdom, because the kingdom we're in is not doing so well. It's divided. It's deeply divided. And whatever happens will be by a slim margin, and the divide is real. I mean, we've got a church here in Tucson that I never would have imagined kind of digging in its heels as far as it is. Is kind of bringing having an event here in Tucson with just like a straight up Christian nationalist. It's almost entirely political. It's different.
Right. And so I want to maybe put people at ease and say that since the mid-90s until now, we are in when it comes to court cases, when it comes to the legal system, the most religious freedom we have ever experienced.
Yep, this is true.
So in that way, that's not my concern. My concern really is the policy trajectory both presidents, one, doesn't matter, Harris or Trump, are going to put us on, and the violence that seems to be built around the two of them, and the violent rhetoric in public.
Yep.
That's what concerns me more than any of the
there's a violent rhetoric, there's a violent faction on the right and the left. Yes, I agree that from a pure like what's in the law, what's on the books, actually it's not that crazy.
No.
And I would say that to a Christian, I would say that to a right-leaning Christian, I would say that to a left-leaning Christian. I would say that to a unbelieving right or left-leaning person. I would say even though there's some issues that you're very concerned about or upset about, generally it's not that crazy. But I agree with you. It's more like the polarization. The two groups are moving further from each other.
Yeah.
And and the divide trickles down into families, into neighbors. A neighbor of mine is posting placards in the middle of the road. I know what they think. Right?
Yeah.
But it's I feel good about my neighbor, but it's dividing us.
But it's the nature of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's happened. I'm not saying that's new, but I think the space between is significant right now. And then, like you said, the violent potential is real. I think if we, and I don't say this to say like, go armor up or run away. I'm not. I think there's a faithful presence that Christians are to practice in the midst of this.
No, I agree.
But I think you need to be aware that it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. One quick correction: it is not Theology in the Raw. It's Truth Over Tribe that has that interview.
Okay.
But yeah, which, by the way, Truth Over Tribe, amazing podcast. If you're just looking for people to be talking about politics and listening to both sides.
I've never heard that one.
But
so the Democratic National Convention. I mean, if you lean left,
then you're watching.
Oh yeah, you're watching, and I'm curious because I wanted to kind of hear the voice of the platform. I mean, when Harris said, and then there's what's said and what's true, right? I know that, but when a big assertion was, "I will be in this not for myself," I thought, oh, that's a strong argument right now. Mm-hmm. That is, when it gets into more of the policies, I go, well, I'm not as convinced about those, but that was strong, and you could see the really religious devotion. I saw a cartoon by a theologian today that had it was essentially a golden calf, but the right side of it was the donkey and the left side was the elephant, and had Christians worshiping this two-headed golden calf, and it said "Politics saves" over it. And I thought, yeah, there's a religious devotion to these politicians that's part of the divide. Yeah. Is that religious devotion, and Christians, what that cartoon should have or could have exhibited is how difficult it is for the Christians on both sides of that are to worship the same God. What would it even look like for them to do that again together? Yeah. That's as Christians, that's our problem, is we don't know how to be. We're following the factions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I don't really have an answer anymore. I don't either. Yeah. I mean, I think, well, I do. I feel like I do, because I think I have direct mandates from Jesus. And I think if any political book should be read over and over again, it's the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah. Which, by the way, the early church memorized. They had the sermon because they didn't have anything else really. They weren't, you can just access Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So everybody memorized the Sermon on the Mount. So they knew it, and it is the ethic of the kingdom. Yeah. And there is so much about caring for the downcast. Oh yeah. And the way that I hold myself, and the value systems that I hold to, and the morality that I hold to, and I think that I understand. I understand that mandate. Yeah. And I understand the mandate to pray for my leaders. If Harris gets elected, I will pray for her. If Trump gets elected, I will pray for her. When they violate the gospel, I will say this is a violation of the gospel. Yeah. You can't I will not. I won't stand for this. Now, how I understand the gospel is a problem, because we don't all even think about the gospel the same way. Right. So that's one of the Christian problems is we on the left, you're probably more likely to emphasize the gospel implications for public life, and on the right, you're more likely to emphasize the spiritual dimensions of the gospel and how it affects your relationship with God. And the Bible refuses to separate the two. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think probably if you're on the right, you're more looking to have moral law.
in place, and if you are on the left, you are more likely to see you might want moral law, but you're looking at how the law helps the downtrodden. You're looking at more the social function of the gospel and how the law.
It's if you were to take actually what I said, I should probably nuance that. It's more like if you were to take the 10 Commandments, the right takes a few, the left takes a few, and says these are the most important ones.
Mm-hmm.
So where the right might, and then disagrees on what some of them mean. So when it says, you shall not kill, the left would go, okay, so like minority communities who are dying because of starvation and disease and so on and so forth, and lack of jobs, and the death penalty, and even like unjust war and so on. And then the right would go, oh, well, excuse me, like if you don't do just war, there's a cost of innocent life on the other side of that. And when you fight for women's reproductive rights, you're actually taking the life of someone else. And so the debate, which is in a sense a healthy one, if it leads you toward like keeping the commandment more faithfully, but it's the divide is dividing up the commandment too. It's, well, I stand for this side of the commandment. Well, I stand for this side of the commandment. Anyway, that's it feels like the commandment. If you're thinking about worshiping this God, we can't unite under the commandment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's maybe what I don't have the answer to. Is I feel a sense of how we ought to follow Jesus in this, but what I have not figured out, and maybe never will, is how to bring people into the unity that Jesus prayed for in a divided time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing on all this that really scares me is so I live in a community house, and Julie's brother-in-law came over, and he is in Texas. He's a philosopher, teaches philosophy, and he was talking to my daughter, who's a librarian, just got her master's in library science. He's like, "Hey, can I actually fly you down and talk to my philosophy 101 students about what is truth and lie in media and how we determine those things?" Because they don't know how to do it. They do not know how to dissect. This is a real source. This is not a real source. Yeah. This is true and this is not true.
I think our younger people
factual.
I think our younger people struggle with that because they're aware of all the variety of possibilities. Our older people struggle with that even more because they're used to consuming generally factual media, and they don't know how it works anymore.
Right. I would agree with you. And I think the other thing is that, 50, 60, 100, we used to understand the rhetorical argument. Yeah. Now we do not know how to dissect a rhetorical argument, but rhetoric is being used against us. Yeah. But we don't know how to dissect it and actually see what the argument is and say, oh, that's a good argument or it's not. And so we are now being swayed back and forth very easily. So these are things that I think lead to violence.
Yeah.
Because we don't understand and we can't follow complexity anymore in a lot of ways.
I was feeling that as I watched portions of Harris's speech, where I thought, she's a prosecutor. She is trained in good rhetoric. And she's good at it. She's very good at it. And so there were points where I went, ooh, you queued me up for this very well. Like, all her upbringing and the middle class stuff, like, oh boy, that resonates, with me and a lot of other people. And then here comes an issue that I'm not actually convinced of, but because I'm feeling very connected with, and and the line is being drawn as if this is for you, and I had to kind of pause and go, ooh, this is well crafted. This is well-crafted argumentation. I need to think about it as such to really process through how I feel about this. I can't just swallow this thing whole. But I agree with you that there's even just that process of slowing down and going back and forth. You think of old, parliamentary debates and stuff where people would get up and give their impassioned speech, and then the other speech would come, and it was, It was taking the other position, and you work back and forth, and people don't, and then afterward they shake hands and go out to lunch because they understand that they were engaging in rhetoric. That feels impossible now.
And I think so. The other thing, so when I was listening to the interview on Truth Over Tribe, she was also the person being interviewed was also played the same role in the second Bush administration.
Oh, okay.
So she talked about when she stepped down from that position, you get to go to the president's, to the Oval Office with your family, and you get to take a picture with the president.
Yeah.
And so she goes to George Bush and she thanks him. Thank you for letting me serve you. And And he immediately stopped her and said, "You did not serve me. You served the American people.
Yeah.
You should not be thanking me."
Wow. Yeah.
Corrected her very quickly. Yeah. Where she said that when you go to the Trump administration, by the time, she was forced to resign. And by the time that happened, they were giving loyalty tests, which is typical in these administrations. But the loyalty tests, she said, were things like, the majority of the questions were, which episode of Apprentice did you like?
Interesting.
What statements in the campaign were your favorite? What Trump moments? So it was, she said, and when the State Department and Homeland Security and all that, they stopped bringing things to the president if they didn't have to. They said, we have to figure out how to agree because we can't get him to make a decision that isn't about him.
Right.
And she was trying to be very honest, and I thought, wow, okay, that is a shift. And I don't know if it's just Trump. Like, did that happen with Clinton? Did that start?
Yeah.
When did this moment when we said it's about the image and it's about you and not necessarily about the office with which you're taking? Is this only a Trumpian thing, or did we start decaying? Was this a process? I don't know.
I remember I watched a documentary about healthy yogurt. Which
we're going left field here.
So obviously ties in, doesn't it? But they were talking about at one point how difficult it was to get it into stores. And one of the people said, here's the thing about stores. It's not really driven by what's good for people. It's driven by what people want. And so if you want healthier food, you will have to stop buying the other food.
Right.
And that's your role. That's what you have to do. And that, I have never forgotten that, because I realized immediately that's not just about yogurt. That's about so many, that's how markets work, right? That's how.
Right.
And so I would actually say, I think that what Trump has learned and does with a lot of expertise is he knows what we want. He's a marketer. He's a business person. He has those people in his corner. And so I don't even know if it started with, I think when Bush did that, that's what people wanted. They wanted it to be about
the office
and about the people.
Yeah.
And now I think if you really got down to the core desire, like if you watch how we consume media and everything, we don't want it to be about people. We want a hero. We want the inspiring figure who is everything that we are not, and doesn't, and stands against all the things we're afraid to stand for. And I think so, in a way, like Trump asking all those questions about what are your favorite moments, I do think he's self-absorbed, but I also think he's giving America what it wants.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. So here's a weird theory. Do you remember Crossfire?
No.
Because the Crossfire was in the mid 90s, and there was two opposite sides of people.
Was this like the debates?
Out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I do.
And it had Tucker on it, Tucker Carlson. So there's the famous moment when Jon Stewart goes on to this, onto Crossfire, and he's really just takes his comedic prowess and destroys the show forever. And launches his career in a lot of ways over in Comedy Central,
where it becomes
on the Daily Show.
Yeah,
but he creates then from there. Like what happens is everybody in the news imitates him.
Yeah,
which is to make fun of the opposite side.
Yeah,
and then when they try to get you to talk about something substantive, you're just like, and you do your little comedy thing and you push it aside.
Do you think Weekend Update predated that.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I think once he destroyed that, like now when you see that's what our representatives are doing.
Yeah.
They mock the other side, which is in politics, but now it's just, we never talk about substance. We're always in the mock mode.
Right. And
the yelling over each other mode. And at least in Crossfire, you gave your position, the other person gave their position, then you had a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But
yeah, no, that's a really interesting line of thought. Like how do these like entertainment news shows and the traction that they gained end up influencing all of this?
Yeah. So can we can we pivot to Ecclesiastes?
I'm ready to. I think we need to pivot. Well, we were going to talk about that rainbow flag too.
Okay. Yeah.
So the question was, when my daughter asks,
about this, she's 6 or 7. What am I supposed to say? Like, how do I explain this in a way that's going to not develop so much curiosity about it, but settle her down, give her the truth about it?
Sure.
Like, what do you say?
Well, I'm trying to think. I don't know that I had this direct discussion with my daughter, like specifically about the rainbow flag.
But, I've never had one about the flag.
But there were some similar things. And what I always wanted to be careful of is I wanted my daughter to understand the complexity of things that were being said, also understand that their friend at school or something might not understand that complexity. And also understand that a lot of times, even people that we vehemently disagree with, or could vehemently disagree with, are trying or groping toward the same things we are, that are searching for truths just like us and are human like us. And so I'm trying to imagine
a 6 or 7-year-old.
A 6 or 7-year-old, I know. But I mean, I think I would say something like, the rainbow flag has different meanings to different people right now in our country. Most people that do that are talking about something called diversity. You know how there's a lot of people in your school who are different from one another. Have you noticed that? Some people think different, some people look different, so on and so forth. That flag is meant to celebrate that. How do you feel about that? And then I would expect the kid to be like, "Oh, being different is good," and stuff, and go, "Yeah, that's true." And then I think I would follow up and go, "Yeah, I agree with that, and God agrees with the idea that diversity is good." And then I'd say, "Now, here's the thing: have you ever noticed that sometimes people disagree about what different means and what differences are good? Are there some similarities that are good? Some ways in which we need to be on the same page, and kind of let them process through that." And then I would say the thing we have to work out is that people have different ideas around what should be diverse and what should be the same. And you will disagree with people about that. And sometimes when people have that flag on, it's trying to disagree with somebody too. It's a form of disagreeing. Your friend might not understand all of that at school, who wears the flag, or some, and just say like, let's keep talking about it.
No, it's good. I like that.
I don't know, something of that.
No, that was pretty. I'd give you at least an A- on that answer. That was good.
Wow, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said some things I did not, and I was like, oh man, I wish I'd said that. Well, anyway, that was really helpful. I like the process of trying to help the person think it through, and I like just starting with a diversity point, because I didn't. I was like, okay, I think I got a little bit like, my fear was I don't want to give this little girl like words that then she says out loud in public and finds herself maybe being ashamed or corrected or put someone else in that kind of position. So I want her to understand what this represents without having her to get just to have to think about it, to have it burden her more than it needs to at 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I liked your direction. The diversity is a good place to start. And it gives place for conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes.
All right, Christian. I know you've been waiting, but I think you figured out that everything's just dust in the wind by now.
Yeah, I was going to say, haven't we exhibited it though? Really, the futility of it all. So here's where I would start. I'll start with this more conceptually, and then I want to talk about the way that we understand the Bible and its books. But so Christian and others, do you ever think about all the complexities of life as we've just discussed in this podcast and go, is there even really a solution? Is any of this actually going to work? Is history going to just keep repeating itself? Are empires just going to come and go and rise and fall? Are people ever going to really reconcile the way that they should? And you go, you know what? It feels like there's little tastes, but overall it all kind of just feels like it just keeps cycling, and it's just gonna happen.
And my life doesn't really matter much.
Yeah, like that my life is kind of a blip, that there's just a time for war, a time for peace. That feeling. Ecclesiastes is a book that gives us permission to feel that way.
Yep.
And that God is with us as we realize and process that much of life does indeed feel that way.
Right. And I think if you do a careful reading of Ecclesiastes, you will begin to notice the subtext that the only thing that gives any meaning to anything is God.
Yeah.
And outside of that, there is no meaning.
Yeah. So, yeah, it does.
And we're just like the animals, as it says.
Yeah. It lands there in small moments, but it really engages in the whole process of feeling the futility of it all.
Yeah.
And that is a common human experience. You can be doing the most meaningful, you get your dream job, you marry your dream girl, you do all the things, and you find yourself sitting there one day going, what's the point? And you will. Mm-hmm. You will feel that way. And if you think that means that God has left you and there's nothing in his word for you, that's really sad. But in moments like that, you could flip to Ecclesiastes and go, okay, this is common. This has been preserved for God's church to remember, that while there is hope in God and it is the only thing, this is the way life feels sometimes.
Right. And I think if you put Ecclesiastes and Job next to each other, I think the invitation of both books, though Job has a different kind of ending, though they're a little similar.
They're both wisdom literature.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that there's an invitation for some lengthy time to just be in that. Mm-hmm. Without a solution. You can have an existential crisis. Yes, it's okay.
That's okay, and you don't have to just have an answer and get back to it. You can sit in it.
And I like what Christian said, is there's a lot of whiplash in it. And I think that is part of being human in a fallen world.
Yeah.
And I think what it fosters is a sacred discontent, that you don't find yourself this is the place that I want to preserve all this. I want it to get better and better. No, something needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so, there's an invitation just to be in that.
So I think that's the core of what you're supposed to experience. Hannah at our church, and I say her name openly because she did a podcast with us on her conversion story that's on the Odd Church podcast, one of our 5 podcasts we did over there. But a big part of Hannah's conversion to Christianity was reading the book of Ecclesiastes, because she actually read it and went, now that's more like it. Because it resonated with how she felt. And she went, a God who's willing to allow for this kind of thinking?
Yeah.
Who doesn't just say blind allegiance or get out there and feel better, everything's going to be okay. Because she was coming from the self-help world that just tries to assure you everything's going to be okay. Or therapy you back into a healthy place or whatever. And she was like, man, to read Ecclesiastes and just go, yeah, this is how it feels. It felt real. It felt like this is a real and honest faith. So that happens, and I think the reason for that, I actually think Ecclesiastes is very well timed for a time like ours, for times when things aren't adding up and going well and making sense. I think the book resonates very deeply. I actually think you'll see a lot more people who are seeking God giving Ecclesiastes a read, and I would recommend it for people who are in that space. I think it really resonates. But then on the Bible reading side, I would assume, Christian, as I did growing up and as many of us do, when we open up our Bibles, we expect these books to do kind of the same thing and have the same effect.
Right.
And I think it's, unfortunately, we pastors don't explain that as much as we should. I know I need to explain it more. That these books are not the same genre, they are not written for the same purpose. Therefore, you read them with different, or you should read them with very different expectations. And oftentimes we open up the Bible like it's just one thing. Like I do believe that it is an inspired collection, that God is behind it. I do believe that, but I also don't believe that God intended for us to read it all the same. So you've got your history books that I describe it this way to people. It's like if you had a bookshelf of, like, here's the bookshelf of the gamut of my Christian faith. So here's a creation story over here on the left. And then here are some just historical records that kind of undergird this thing and show that these are actual people who did these things in the past. And then here are some great poems and songs from ancient worshiping traditions. And here are a couple of books by the philosophers, the old philosophers, right, who were working this out for day-to-day life. And then here are some preachers, the prophets. So here's some preachers from the early days who were applying this to people's lives in a very different time and place. And then here's a story of Jesus, which in Christianity is this profound moment where God enters in and actually fulfills that which he's designed and commanded. And people are giving witness to that and saying, it happened, I saw him, this is what occurred. And then you get some historical letters of people who are applying what Jesus did to the lives of others. And then you get an incredible book that says, here's what's been going on behind the scenes the whole time, and here's the end result that actually agrees back with the ancient prophets' revelation. So you have this bookshelf, and if you had a bookshelf like that and you were like, you know what, I'm just trying to figure out, I need motivation to go to work, you probably wouldn't pull off the history book recording all the details and hunt in that for, probably not. You might go, well, maybe one of those letters that taught people how to live in light of Jesus might have some wisdom for me there. And I would usually recommend you read that letter straight through and see what it has to say. Ecclesiastes is the old philosopher. Here's somebody who's thinking about the philosophy of life lived in faith, but they're engaging the questions a philosopher engages. How does this work? What does this mean? How much stock should I put in this, that, or the other? What's the anchor I can hold on to? What's the most important principle behind it all? And then how does the rest of it work out? And the philosopher would speak to philosophers of their day, in the ways that they would speak. So pick it up expecting more of a philosophical treatment. That's how I would say it. How about you, Eric? I've gone on and on about my bookshelf.
I don't disagree. I think you're right on. I don't have any other things to say about it. I mean, that's a great explanation, and it elicits imagination, which I always encourage. I think you should imagine it's not just a book with pages, but there's a man sitting there. He's the philosopher, and he's talking to you about life and God and the reality of things. That's the exciting part, is when you start using your imagination to understand the communicating that's happening. And I think it's good. We're not reading the Bible, you don't open the Bible to fix your life.
Right.
If you're doing that, or to get some great, knowledge that somehow is going to change everything. You get it to meet Jesus, and you do that. He's multi-faceted, and it comes out of the story of God's relationship to people and how he relates to them and how people are.
Ecclesiastes is almost like memoir and philosophy too, because it's, and as is true with, like, if you went and read like Foucault or something, one of the philosophers, you'd realize, and if you learned about his life, you'd realize he tried to live out of his philosophy.
Sure.
His philosophy was not just in the mind, it was something that he went and tried to live, and there were effects of that, some of them difficult in his life.
Figure out from Nietzsche to Bertrand Russell. Yeah,
right.
They're not just, I have this philosophy out here and then I live this completely different life.
Right. They're living it out. And so you're kind of experiencing, this is a philosopher who went, I tried to live the life that was governed by possessions. I tried to live the life of, giving myself everything that I wanted. I did that. And here's how I felt at the end of it, meaningless. So you're kind of, if you take it that way, you get to go, okay, like, I've seen other people try to live out of their philosophy and they're coming to similar conclusions. So that's another way you would engage it. So it's going to come across very different than a letter instructing you how to run Paul to Timothy, teaching him how to run a Christian community in the ancient Roman world. That's just a very different purpose of the book. Here you're supposed to kind of read this guy's biographical philosophy and imagine what that was like and go, what about me? What do I chase after? What am I putting my stock in? Where is that going to lead?
Right.
So different books, you use them in different ways, and you have different expectations. If you go to Ecclesiastes expecting to be taught how to live, you could actually come away with some really bad ideas.
Sure.
If that was its point, if the whole point was instructional and you could just turn to Ecclesiastes 4 and pick out a verse and apply it, you might not want to apply it. That might be a bad idea. And I think we're not used to, there's Psalms like that too. There's Psalms that are just crying out guttural, gut-wrenching feelings that maybe you wouldn't actually want to live that way. Like when the, imprecatory psalm says, may their children's heads be dashed against the stone. There's no tradition of Christianity that says, that's a fine thing to do. Go dash your enemies' children against the stone. It's not. It's wrong. But the psalmist was crying out his feelings, and God didn't strike him down. That's what you're supposed to learn.
Yeah. But I'm just like, good stuff there.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of response to it. I agree with you. I think the Psalms give you a permission to be emotional.
Yeah.
And it's in the confines of God.
Yeah.
Right? God's the only one who can handle the fullness of your anger and its irrationality.
Yes. And that's a great application. Like for those of us who feel deep emotion, like, people can't all handle it, but God can. Mm-hmm. And that could drive you to prayer, which is what the Psalm is.
Yeah. So I think those are, I think enjoy Ecclesiastes, and maybe you have more insights that you want to share with us.
Yeah.
And help us better understand Ecclesiastes. So.
Christian, excellent question, though. I think I hear questions like that in my church all the time about, I'm reading this book of the Bible. What in the world do I do with that? It's a great, I think you are so not alone in that question, and I hope some of that was helpful. So,
maybe someday we'll just do a little series on the Judges and crazy.
There's another one.
Crazy stories.
Woo-wee. The book gets way more interesting the more you dive into it. I have before, but it's, if don't go there to be encouraged. That's, speaking of, America is not ancient Israel, but the Judges is, here's a culture spiraling downward into
everyone
near disintegration.
What was right in their own eyes.
In their own eyes. Yep.
The famous statement.
Yep. Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you for doing this podcast. It's been a couple weeks, but last week we just decided to have our own faith over breakfast without anybody.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was good, I think.
We got a delicious breakfast. So the breakfast sure was better.
Yeah, it was way better.
Yeah.
It was at Le Buzz, so it was good.
Man.
It was a little warm outside, though.
It was a little warm outside.
But it's all right. It was quiet.
Yeah.
All right, so if you want to respond, you can do that by sending us a text just like Christian did. He just clicked the send us a text, wrote his name down, asked the question, and boom. A couple weeks later, maybe a month later, he got an answer to it all.
Love it.
He's probably like now reading Habakkuk, and he's way gone past Ecclesiastes, but we got there. So if you got questions about Habakkuk, Christian, you can you can ask us, and we'll talk about that. But anyone else who's got a question, maybe about politics, maybe about something that they're wrestling with that they just can't figure out, we'll give it a shot. If you send us a text message or an email at Faith Over Breakfast. Or just grab one of us if you're a villager or a missioner and say, hey, you guys should talk about this.
And we'll probably remember it.
Yeah, we'll probably.
Yeah.
One of us will remember.
Yeah. Well, I just let out a big yawn. That's a good sign in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Then not good for a pastor.
What is about to happen?
Hopefully you're not working on a sermon.
I am. Yeah.
Me too.
So anyway, apparently I need to drink more coffee, but thank you all for tuning in, and we will look forward to hearing your questions. You can email us too if you're old school, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. Remember to like us, give us 5 stars, that kind of stuff if you enjoy it, because it sure does help get us out there.
3,
whatever the rubric is.
Give us money.
You can always donate to the podcast. We really do just use it for operating costs. We're not making big money on you. But thank you. We without you guys listening, we wouldn't do this. And it means a lot that you care.
It does. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.